Welcome back to another episode of Bible Conversations. Today, we're going to be talking about sacrifice. Well, I'm back. Baby Riley has arrived, got a few good weeks at home before coming back into the office with my wife and my little baby, and now I'm back and ready to do another episode. But I feel like I have to give everyone an update. Maybe that's because every time I talk to people that I haven't seen in a few weeks, they're always asking how things are going. You know, how's the baby doing? How's Emily doing? And she's just beautiful. Literally the cutest baby I've ever seen. And I don't think I'm being biased when I say that.
Of course you're not. No, you couldn't be biased.
Yeah, no, she's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. So precious. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you've seen pictures. If you somehow have missed it, then Facebook's algorithm just doesn't like me. But look me up and check out the pictures. She's just absolutely wonderful. But
she's very precious.
As far as our topic today, though, we're talking about sacrifice and in continuing with our series of a Christian's responsibility. And so it falls under our responsibility as Christians to live sacrificially, right? Is that a word?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Sacrificially is a word.
My brain is not entirely here right now.
You've got the dad brain right now.
Yeah.
You've got the parent brain, the lack of sleep brain, all of the things. But yeah, no, sacrificially is a word, and it's something that we do have to live that way. So there's a few verses that come to mind. The first actually is Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, when it pertains to living a sacrificial life, living a life that is really pleasing in God's eyes. Romans 12, 1 and 2 is just such a powerful verse. And what it says is this, in verse 1, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And that phrase, living sacrifice, is such an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Because a sacrifice is something that perishes, that dies, that is given up.
Yeah.
And living is the opposite of dying and death, and it's life, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just an interesting phrase. But what he's talking about is that as we live, we are to deny ourselves. And that's such an important part of the Christian walk, because what do you think most people's most commonly used word is?
I.
Yes.
Yeah.
I or me or my or some variation of the personal pronoun that relates to themselves, right?
Yeah.
And as we go about this life, we have to be very careful that we don't allow as Christians for that to be our most commonly used word.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's seems like an oxymoron, but it isn't, because you're continuing to live your life. You're just not living it for yourself.
Yeah.
And when we look to the Old Testament, as far as the worship to God in the Old Testament, it was sacrifice of animals, of bulls and goats, and the shedding of their blood to atone for sin, to sacrifice that and to worship God. They had all sorts of different sacrifices that they would do. But today we have just one sacrifice for us. Yep. It's Jesus Christ, and it's the shedding of His blood, the pouring out of His blood that atones for our sin. One sacrifice, one time for all. Yep. And Jesus instructs us, hey, if you want to be part of that, if you want to be in me, to be covered in my blood, to be washed clean in me, then you also need to do some sacrificing. But it's not a physical sacrifice. It's a sacrifice of our wants and our desires, and what we would say, hey, this pleases me, instead we seek what pleases God.
Absolutely. Speaking of the sacrifice of Christ, it's once for all, and those that are in the Old Testament, Hebrews chapter 10, the Hebrew writer talks about that very clearly. Chapter 10, verse 1, For since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, instead of the true form of these realities, it can never, by the same sacrifices that are continually offered every year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, would they not have ceased to be offered, since the worshippers, having once been cleansed, would no longer have any consciousness of sins? But in these sacrifices there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Then you go down to we'll go to verse 9. Behold, I have come to do your will. He does away with the first, in order to establish the second. And by that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is his sacrifice that has allowed us to be free of sin, to be free of the guilt of sin, right? Which is it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
And I love just the imagery of being covered in the blood of Christ, to be washed in the blood of Christ, to be clothed with Christ, because it's the imagery that says when God looks at me, he doesn't see my life of sin. Instead, he sees his perfect son, Jesus Christ, because I've been clothed with Christ.
Yes.
That's what he sees in me.
Yeah. It's like Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
Exactly. Well, and that's really the summary of what we're talking about today, Galatians 2:20. But Jesus says this himself. We have plenty of passages, Romans, Hebrews, Galatians, that talk about living a life of sacrifice, but Jesus gives the command himself in Luke chapter 9.
Yes, he does.
As right after Peter confesses that he is the Son of God, in verses 18 and following, Jesus tells them in verse 23, he says, and he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. That's the baseline command from Christ. Hey, if you want to be a follower of me, you have to deny yourself and follow me. You have to take up your cross. And even that phrase of take up your cross, there's so many different applications that can be taken from that. Yeah. It's the idea of, okay, I'm going to take up my cross and be crucified as though Christ is crucified. In other words, I'm dying to my own life. Or even the idea of I'm going to pick up my cross, to carry my cross as Jesus carried his cross to Calvary, and I'm going to be carrying this Christianity with me wherever I go, so that people will know who I belong to. I just love all of the applications that come from the idea of carry your cross.
Well, and what's really interesting about that phrase is that this is obviously before Jesus has actually been crucified, right? And nobody knows, except for Jesus. Nobody knows
that's going to be his form of
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Not only that, but society as a whole at this point in time loathed the cross. Yeah. It was a sign of shame. It was a sign of humiliation. It was a sign of rejection by society. Yeah. Right. And so Jesus is saying, listen, you take up your cross. You are to be humbled by everybody else, right? You are to be set apart from everybody else. You're going to be different. You're going to be different, right? Yeah. And that which is maybe shameful in the world is something that you have to carry, right? Yeah. You're going to be despised by my name's sake, Jesus says. And so in verse 26, he even uses the phrase ashamed, right? He says, whoever is ashamed of me and of my words, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the angels. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of carrying the cross, right? Like carry your shame. Yeah. This shame of the cross is the path to salvation.
Yeah. But I love that Christians shouldn't be ashamed of the cross. And Paul even says that I take pride in Christ. I don't take pride in anything else, not in any of my own accomplishments, not in anything that I've done in this life. Yeah. It's all rubbish. But I take pride in Jesus, that I'm a child of his, that I belong to him. I'm proud of that because it's what he has done, not what I have done. And so while it's something that the world looks upon shamefully, that's what we are to carry with pride.
Yeah. Well, and up to about 400 AD, the cross was not really associated with Christianity, right? So like today it is intrinsic, right? We think of the cross, we think of Jesus, right? Yep. Well, back then when they thought of the cross, they thought of criminals and they thought of, insurrectionists and murderers and all of these just awful, terrible people, not fit for society, right? And so we have this idea in our mind of, well, the cross is Christ and Christ is the cross. Mm-hmm. And when this was being written, that was not the case, right?
Yeah.
And so it's I just think, a really interesting consideration that even before Jesus died, he was telling people that you need to take up your cross.
Yeah. Society is going to look bad on you. Yeah.
It's just a really interesting thing, but it's this idea of sacrifice, right? That what you think you want in this life, what you think you need in this life, is not what you want and is probably not what you need, right? What you need is Jesus.
Yeah, it's sacrificing success, sacrificing things that will move you up the social ladder, so to speak, things that will help you, things that will make you feel accomplished in this life. And I mean, we were even having a class with the teenagers just last night about this. The topic is how to stay faithful after high school. That's been our fall Wednesday night topic. And there was this discussion of, we teach, yes, you should strive for success in whatever you set out to do in life. If you want to be a doctor, then you need to be successful in that. Work hard at that. If you want to be a lawyer, work hard at it to be successful at it. If you want to be a police officer, fill in the blank. Whatever you want to be, you need to work hard. And we teach our kids that because that's a good work ethic. That's a proverb. Work at everything that you would do as though you're working for the Lord and not for man. I know I botched that, but
work heartily as for the Lord and not for man.
Yeah. But that's what we teach because we should. Everything that we do, we should work as though we're working for the Lord and not for man. But then we also teach, and you need to be a solid Christian. You can't give up on your faith. You need to be the best Christian that you could possibly be. Yeah. But for some reason, we teach those things separately.
Yes.
We teach you need to be successful in life, and we teach you need to be a solid Christian and successful as a Christian. But instead, no, they should be combined. You should be the best Christian doctor. You should be the best Christian lawyer. You should be the best Christian police officer. Because whatever you're doing, it's a life of sacrifice that you don't care about moving up the ranks. The number one thing you care about is sacrificing your own wants and desires so that you can glorify God along your life. Yeah. And you're not changing anything. You're going away to live on a mountain just by yourself in solitude so that you can.
There's not a commune.
No. Instead, it's along my life as I go.
Yeah.
I am not seeking my own desires above the glorifying of God.
Absolutely. And that really fits right in with another of Jesus's teachings, right? In Luke 14, just a few chapters over. It says great crowds accompany him, verse 25. So he's got a bunch of people. He's like, all right, time to talk. He turns to him and he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And that's a bold and a hard teaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
You got to hate everything else. You cannot be my disciple, right? Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. And then he talks about, building a tower. You got to count the cost, right? Or going to war with so many soldiers against so many soldiers. You got to count the cost. What king goes to war without considering whether he'll win? What builder, starts building a tower without considering whether he can finish it, right? And then in verse 33, he finishes this whole section and he says, therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Jesus is not saying that we have to sell everything that we have currently, give it up, give it away, and live a destitute life on whatever we can find in the trash can. What he's saying is that the things of this life cannot hold sway over us to the point where we refuse to give them up under any circumstances, right? If a tornado comes and hits our house and we've got to rebuild, we've got to rebuild. Our faith is in Christ, not in our house, right? If we become bankrupt because of, company that we are investing, whatever goes down, right? Our faith is in Christ. Our hope is in Christ. It's not in people. It's not in things. It's in Jesus. Yeah. And that really is the bottom line, is this idea of sacrificing. It may mean giving up some of the things you have.
Yeah.
It absolutely might. You might have to get rid of your things. Well,
and that's why you have to count the cost. You have to say, would I be willing to give anything up for Christ? Am I willing to give up? And not just physical possessions, but we're talking about literally anything, any kind of status, any kind of relationship that you may have. You have to say, is this more valuable to me than Jesus Christ? And if it is, then it has to be removed. It has to be adjusted because Jesus is the number one thing. That's the idea of sacrifice. Yeah. That's the idea of deny yourself and take up your cross. And in order to do that, you have to count the cost.
Yeah. What will it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?
Yeah.
Right. And Jesus is the only answer. He is the way, the truth, and the life. It's only through him that we have hope. And so to consider our life and the things that we have, the relationships we share, all of the stuff that is in our life, we have to be willing to sacrifice all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the sake of Christ.
And we kind of see that example in Acts chapter 2. As the church is being established, the day of Pentecost has just happened. Thousands of people become Christians, men and women. And we see the workings of the church and what they would do. In verse 42, it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. What I see there is a complete disregard for anything physical in the world.
Materialism.
A disregard for material things. Instead, it's a complete focus on God, on Christ, and on his church.
Yep.
That's where the focus is.
Absolutely. And it's not an easy thing to do. In fact, it's very hard to do because we're bombarded with materialism every day, especially here in the United States. I mean, you can't leave your house without seeing a plethora of material possessions.
Oh, goodness. Not even just leaving your house. Around your house.
Within
your house. Or even if you try to listen to some music, there's going to be an ad that pops up from Amazon asking you to buy more material things.
Buy more stuff. Buy more things. It'll make you happy, right? So how do we then as Christians, and in particular, those of us in America, or those of us who live in countries where materialism is a real problem, how do we go about being sacrificial with our stuff and with our time?
I think it starts by what we were kind of saying a moment ago. We need to count the cost.
Yeah.
We need to evaluate what we have in this life. Yeah. And this actually accomplishes a few things. When you go through and look at what you have, what is important to you, number one, you're going to start to recognize God's blessings.
Yeah.
When you take the time to count what you have, to count what God has given you, then it will really start to humble you. But then also you'll start to see, wow, I greatly value this. Do I value this more than my faith? If I lost this, or
what am I more afraid to lose?
Yeah, what am I most afraid to lose? And so really counting the cost, and not so much if you're already a Christian and already have committed your life to Christ and have been baptized into him, it's not so much of like, okay, do I need to give this up in order to follow him? Because you've already said, yes, I'm going to follow him. I'm going to commit my life to him. Yeah. But it's a matter of counting the cost moving forward. I think this is something that really we as Christians should be doing more than just, okay, before you're baptized, let's count the cost real quick. Are you able to say, I'm going to commit my life to Christ? Yeah. It's something that we have to do throughout our lives.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, circumstances change, life changes. I mean, for goodness sake, you just had a child.
Yeah.
Your life is vastly different from 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like it's not even remotely close to the same. Your house is different.
There's pink everywhere.
I mean, it's completely different, right? And so we absolutely have to continually count the cost. It's the same thing. A general goes to war. Well, you don't count the cost first, and then all of a sudden the battle turns, and you're like, oh no, we counted the cost.
Reevaluate.
We're good. And you reevaluate, right? So you consistently have to do that. And I think really it's the little day-to-day things where you build consistency and discipline and self-control of, well, I'm going to wake up and pray in the morning. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to pray before I go to bed. I'm going to read my Bible for 5 or 10 minutes in the morning and before I go to bed. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. We dedicate and we focus our time on God. And I'm not perfect at it. I'm not even good at that right now. I'm working on that. I'm not good at it, but I'm working on it. And that really is I think the crux of this idea of being sacrificial in our lives. There are a lot of things that I want to do.
Yeah.
that are enjoyable, that are fun. Go see a movie, play video games, play softball, spend time doing X, go see family, do all these things. But what do I need to do? I need to be in the Word of God.
Yeah.
I need to be talking to God.
And quite honestly, with this idea of sacrifice and counting the cost, if you do take the time to count the cost, you're going to, I guarantee you, every person that's listening to this, you're going to find something that's needing to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
You're going to find something that you're going to say, I have to remove this from my life because it's just too much of a distraction. It's too much. It holds too much of my heart.
Yeah.
And I cannot let that take up space where Christ should be filling my entire heart.
Absolutely.
And so,
and that's not to say that those things are sinful or wrong.
No, not inherently.
It is a matter of, as you're saying, what comes first.
Yeah.
What is first and foremost. And that's an honest evaluation, I think, throughout our lives at various points in time is going to find that Jesus is not first and foremost.
Yeah.
Right? He should be. He should always be. But honest evaluations, I know there have been times in my life after becoming a Christian, Jesus has not been first. And I've had to reevaluate and I've had to adjust and I've had to change. And it's hard. It's a tough thing.
I want to give one more thing that we might need to consider in terms of the conversation of sacrifice and counting the cost. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, but it's counting the cost in a sense of where are your defenses weak against Satan? Because sometimes there are things that we have in our life that cause us to be vulnerable to temptation, vulnerable to sin. And those are also things that we may need to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to a lesson I did with the teens on how to stay faithful after high school.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of we need to count the cost in terms of how is Satan going to attack me?
Yeah.
So I asked the question of them, if you were to fall away, if you were to lose your faith for some reason, which for them, a lot of them right now, they're like, I can't even fathom that. There's not a chance. There's no way I'd fall away. There's no way I'd give up my faith. There's no way I'd turn from Christ. Yeah. But just in this hypothetical question, if you happened to, what do you foresee the reasoning?
Yeah.
What is there something in your life that you could see Satan exploiting to turn you away from Christ? Do your friends hold a lot of sway over your thoughts and feelings? Yeah. Are there things in your life that you really value because it takes up a lot of your time? You really enjoy it, and could Satan exploit that? We have to count the cost in terms of how is he going to attack us, and that might lead us to say, I need to
shore up my defenses.
Sacrifice that a little bit too, so I can shore up my defense. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, man, this topic of sacrificing, if we wanted to get specific, we could go on for hours. But I think we've kind of covered the basic premise of the importance of sacrificing and what that looks like in various capacities. Is there anything else you want to say before you close it out?
I just had one other thought. I want to remind everyone, please share this. Share this with anybody who posts on Facebook and says, hey, I want to know about a good Christian podcast. Send them our way. Send them a link to Bible Conversations. Anybody that you're even just having a conversation with and talking about podcasts, it's about to be the holiday season. People are going to be taking road trips. Share this podcast. Yeah. I know it has been encouraging to so many people. It's been encouraging to us.
Absolutely.
But we just want to continue to encourage anybody that we possibly can to help build up the Lord's church, help people to seek to serve Christ every day.
Yeah, to seek and find.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I'll let you close this out, man.
All righty. Well, thank y'all so much for listening to us. If you can just listen a few more minutes or a few more seconds even and see how you can help us out.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Bible Conversations. We want to ask if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments that you please email us at kcocbibleconversations@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media. We've got a Facebook page as well as an Instagram account. Our Facebook page is very simple. It's just Bible Conversations. On Instagram, it's very simple, @Bible Conversations. Look us up, like our posts, and share it with your friends.
We also have an opportunity for you to help us financially through a store via Kim's Closet, and you can find that. You can just type into Google Kim's Closet. We have a link as well that we will be posting in each of our episodes, and we just hope that you will reach out and find us and purchase a hoodie or a shirt. with the logo on it. And that way you can spread the word without having to say a word. So we appreciate you. Thank you all. Have a blessed week.